Our story continues. Malik screamed again and again and again. He screamed even though no one else could hear him, not in the sanctum of his master. He screamed for a release from the agony, even though he knew that none would come until the primus chose. It was within the master's power to see to it that Malik's pain became eternal. Without warning, the endless pain finally ceased and Malik tumbled to the stone floor. The solidity of the floor amazed him. He could have sworn that he had been floating in a sea of needles and flame.
I could have sent a first-year novice in your place and achieved just as splendid results,
Came the primus's voice. There was none of the gentle calm for which he had been known for by his faithful. Malik knew that chilling tone well. It had always been focused on others, though, not upon him, and those whom had been the subject of his ire never left this chamber again.
I am so disappointed in you. I had such high hopes for you, my Malik, such high hopes. Who has been my favorite for far longer than any other mortal.
I have, Great One.
Yes, you have, my Malik. Your life has lasted double that of any human, and in that time, you have witnessed the premature passing of several others, as you may recall.
The high priest of the Order of Maphis truly expected his end to come. He looked up, determined to face his master at the last. The primus remained silent atop his grand chair. So much so that Malik began to shiver despite his attempt to seem confident, even in the face of death, or worse. Typically when the master deliberated so, it was usually to devise something particularly horrific. The primus rose and with measured steps joined his fallen minion. He viewed Malik as if debating something, and for the first time since Malik had managed to escape and return back to the Grand Temple, he allowed himself a glimmer of hope.
I have invested much in you, my Malik.
Each syllable was venom, each word he spoke, doom. Malik simply hung his head down again, certain that the sword would yet come down after all. Instead, however, it was his master's hand, reaching for his own. Trembling, Malik extended his own as the primus guided him to his feet.
I am his son, my Malik, and answer to him as you to me. I will give you your life this once, for there is in my mind a question that even you could not understand, one that might have bearing on this creature, Ultisian.
I am truly grateful, Master. I live only to serve you, I swear. The primus was still holding Malik's hand, and nodded.
Yes, you do. And to remind you of that, I give you a lasting gift.
The high priest screamed anew. His trapped appendage flared as if on fire. Twisted and curled, it transformed to flesh and sinew. In its place was a thing, warped and dripping green. Thick scales scored the limb well past the wrist, and his fingers grew gnarled and clawed, with his last 2 digits becoming fused as one. The primus did not let go of Malik, forcing him to stand to face his master and endure a continued agony long after the spell had finished.
My mark is upon you now, my Malik. My mark and that of my father.
Finally, he released Malik from his firm grip.
Now and forever.
Malik shook, wearily but refusing to fall. He kept his gaze down and said, "Great is Lucian, all-powerful and all-knowing, and greater still is his father, the glorious and benevolent." The human dared to look up again. "Mephisto." Lucian smiled, his perfect teeth suddenly ending sharper and more pointedly. His aspect became shadowed in a manner having nothing to do with light. A glimpse of his true self was enough to make the high priest pale more than ever. Then, as quickly as he had changed, the primus once again looked his kindly part, and reached out to put a hand on Malik's shoulder.
You have learned your lesson well, my Malik. That is why you remain my favorite. For the moment. Now come. We will better pursue this matter below, I believe.
As you wish, Great One.
Malik clutched his twisted hand in agony and fell into place next to the primus as they continued forward. His true name was Lucian, son of Mephisto, and he led Malik not to the doors of the sanctum, but to a wall behind his throne. As they approached, the primus drew an arc in the air. A blazing crimson arc formed on the wall. It quickly lengthened, reaching the stone floor, and before Malik could draw a second breath, the area faded away, revealing a torchlit corridor that descended into the ground as if toward an ancient tomb. Even more sinister were the walls themselves, which were flanked by row upon row of stone-like guards whose fearsome armor did not in the least resemble that of the Peace Warders. The grim guards cast their gazes towards them as they entered deeper within. Their black helms were shaped to resemble the skulls of hornless rams, black pits for eyes, and flesh the color of gravestones. Their breastplates bore the emblem of their unholy calling, a bleeding skull transfixed upon twin swords entwined by serpents. Malik knew their kind well, but unlike his master, they did not frighten him in the least, for he was to lead them in the name of the Primus on the day when the temple would fully control Sanctuary, when all pretenses of being a religious sect could be dropped. Sanctuary was a name only known to a few, most of whom were not of mortal flesh. Malik had learned this from his master, who was in a position to understand that reality better than most. After all, the blood of his master was that of the Lord of Hatred himself, whom some would call a demon. He, along with his brothers Baal and Diablo, were the masters of the burning hells. It was strange because the concepts of good and evil had long ago become unimportant to Malik, except in the most scholarly of senses. The high priest understood only power, and that which the Primus represented was the ultimate power in all creation. Had it not been for the three, the realm of Sanctuary and all its people would not have been. And had they not been tricked by the one they thought an ally and cast out of Sanctuary for centuries, despite that treachery, they now had a foothold back in the world of their making, and soon they would rip it free from the one who had stolen it from them. That cursed figure who betrayed them believed he now had a kingdom all his own, its inhabitants his to play with as he chose. But he had underestimated the three, and in Malik's august opinion, the son of one, Lucian, most of all. It had been Lucian, after all, who had forced the betrayer out of hiding, making his presence known to them. This was the first step in retaking Sanctuary and returning it to what it was meant to be, a place from which those few worthy, such as himself, would be raised up to help the three transform all of existence into a reflection of their true glory. To Malik, that meant more power than the entirety of the mage clans and petty nobles. What exactly the Primus sought of this Odyssean in this regard, even the high priest did not fully understand. It was most likely that Odyssean was to be the first of this new legion of warriors for the three. What other use could there be? The corridor finally came to an end. A shimmering veil of green poison that Malik knew well confronted the pair. Again, the son of Mephisto gestured, and the veil of poison faded away. With a sudden clash of metal against metal, the lair of the morlu lay revealed. It was the name given to the ram-masked soldiers by Lucian. The morlu, it is a word of power, 2 syllables steeped in the magic of the Primus's sire. The morlu were more than just fanatical. They lived and breathed the desire of the Lord of Hatred. They didn't sleep, they didn't eat. All they did was fight. And as the high priest and his master entered the large cavernous chamber, they came upon the morlu doing just that, illuminated by thick, scalding rivers of molten earth that flowed randomly throughout the bowl-shaped chamber that was dug well beneath the grand temple. A sea of armored figures hacked and slashed each other with absolute glee. Every warrior bled from scores of deep ravine cuts across their bodies, limbs strewn upon the ichor-soaked rock floor, and corpses littered the vicinity as far as the eye could see. There were heads separated far from their torsos, mouths, if the jaws were yet still attached, still open in their death screams. Many of the faces lacked eyes, noses, or ears. Some of them still caught up in the battle. They paid no mind to their grievous wounds. There seemed to be no rhyme or reason behind the conflict, no identifiable sides either. The morlus did not have such thoughts. Every warrior fought for himself, siding with his brethren only long enough to accomplish some common goal, at which point they tended to turn upon one another. They cheerfully slew one another with the same titanic effort with which they would have any outside foe. Only against such were they ever truly united, for that is what their lord desired most of them. They were to be a plague that would strike down those who would not be converted, who very likely served the betrayer, be it willing or as a dupe. The primus glanced up at the ceiling with eyes that peered beyond what any mortal could see.
We have timed our visit well. The hour is nigh, my Malik,
murmured the primus, with a tone approaching a fondness of a proud father for his children.
Let us pause and savor the beauty of it all, as it refreshes itself.
Turning his eyes back to the core of the carnage below, Lord Lucian gestured toward the very center where the worst of the carnage had and was still taking place. A large black gemstone, nearly the size of a man sitting, which was embedded in a triangular column of red-streaked marble. Blood marble, it was named. The stone, however, was called by a different name by Malik's master, the Kiss of Mephisto, although the cleric had, from past comments, reason to believe that it had once been named for another of whom Lord Lucian would not speak.
Behold, my Malik.
As if time itself ceased, every morlu warrior abruptly froze. Blades paused halfway into guts, severed heads halted in their tumble from their ruined necks, and utter silence reigned over the humongous lair. The Kiss of Mephisto let out a burst of black light, not darkness, but completely, utterly black light. And as that light rushed over both the fighting and the fallen, they twisted and turned as if their bones had become fluid, lost limbs reattached, gaping wounds sewn together, mangled corpses shivered with renewed animation. Malik felt a twinge of remembrance concerning his own recent change and clutched his now disfigured hand. The ranks of morlu reconstituted themselves, even from the streaming red depths of magma rivers. The warriors emerged resurrected. Their armor glowed bright from the searing heat in which their corpses had bathed, then faded to the door black. It was a miraculous sight to Malik, the raising of the dead and healing of wounds, even though he knew that in some sense it was not what it appeared to be. The stone did not have the ability to bring back life to mortal remains. Those morlu who had been slain either this day or the previous were not in fact even human anymore. Rather, they were cadavers, animated by Mephisto's foul majesty through the will of his son. What existed within was a demonic essence that mimicked the life that had once existed. Every new morlu warrior quickly joined the ranks of the animated. They thought this an honor, believing that their souls were somehow still a part of all this. But what truly happened to those souls, only the Lord of Hatred surely knew, or at least Malik thought. Within moments, the field was again filled with restless fighters in their prime. Several growled at one another, brandishing swords, maces, axes, and the like at potential foes. The blood that had covered much of the area had faded into the rock. To all apparent purposes, it was as if the battle had never taken place.
Demus,
Lord Lucian said. From far off in the cavern, from deep within the ranks, a particularly large and grotesque morlu turned and peered up at the pair. He suddenly raised his massive sword and gave a guttural cry, a salute to his master. The primus nodded and raised one hand with all fingers spread wide. Demus nodded, and began barging through the rows of heaving bodies. Without warning, he seized one by the collar and dragged him from his position. The morlu followed behind Deimos, and the primus's chosen commander sought another. Soon, 5 followed Deimos up to the edge toward where Lucian and Malik awaited them.
Great Master.
Deimos croaked as he bent down on one knee along with the other 5 morlu. Lucian touched Deimos on top of the ram helm, giving his blessing. Deimos then turned his head toward Malik.
High Priest.
Malik repeated his master's gesture.
Rise, Deimos,
commanded the primus.
You are at the High Priest's command. You will obey him in all things. Yes, Great One. There are prey of both life and death involved, Deimos. You understand the difference?
The helm figure nodded. Malik knew Deimos from past need. The helm only partially obscured a face that looked as if the kiss of Mephisto had failed to completely remake it. Not much remained of the nose, save for 2 gaping holes, and Deimos's lower jaw seemed to have belonged to another, even larger creature, perhaps a bear. He had been one particularly ugly human prior to his initiation into the living ranks of the morlu. He was ugly inside and out, and his dark soul even then had disproven the adage of not judging a book by its cover. Indeed, there was little difference now between the mortal Deimos and the thing currently inhabiting his shell.
The High Priest will mark the one to salvage, the others to slay,
continued Lucian.
But you will have to be on your guard for another.
Another? Blurted the cleric, suddenly recalling some of what he had blathered to his lord in defense of his failure. There came an edge to the primus's voice that Malik had never noted in all the years that he had served the Great One, almost as if it sounded like uncertainty. But no, the human quickly decided, that could not be. Lucian was never uncertain. Never.
I have sensed,
the son of Mephisto said after an equally unsettling silence,
that all is not as it appears on the surface. There is some intrusion, some other.
He trailed off, suddenly caught up in thought. The morlu stirred uneasily and Malik grew more perturbed. This was not how the master acted. He never paused so, never hesitated. What was happening? Who was this other? Malik recalled his own suspicions during the debacle against the farmer. He had been overwhelmed by the incredible power wielded by the simplistic Odyssean. Power combined with skill that fools should not have had. The High Priest had wondered then if there was something else going on behind the scenes, that things were not as they had appeared, and it seemed that Lord Lucian thought the same and believed his tale. Mephisto's son shook his head, his expression darkening monstrously.
No, it could never be.
The expression then faded away, leaving in its place the look of utter assurance, to which Malik was more accustomed to.
You will know it,
Primus went on, suddenly and calmly to both the cleric and Deimos.
This time you will know it. It must be obliterated. The farmer, this Odyssean Ul-Diomid, must be preserved, but it, and all else around him shall be no more. Is that understood?
The lead morlu bowed his head in acknowledgement. Malik nodded, his human hand still clutching the transformed one. Lucian noted the High Priest's action.
It is a gift I give you, my Malik. You will see. You will see.
The High Priest eyed the appendage anew. His master did nothing without thought. An actual gift, after all? He could flex the digits easily, and in some cases, in other ways, the old ones could not. The pain had finally begun to subside, and curiously, the cleric also felt stronger than he had.
Now, it is time to seek anew the one called Odyssean. I will in this brook no failure. Is that understood?
Again, there was a mute acknowledgement from both Malik and Deimos.
Then that is all. You will depart immediately.
Eagerness had replaced fear in the heart of the high priest. He silently swore that he would bring Uldician ul Diomed to Lord Lucian, even if it meant beating the farmer until there remained just enough spark for the primus to use. As he led Deimos and the other 5 away, Malik also thought about the other intrusion of which his master had spoken. Despite whatever power it wielded, Lord Lucian wanted nothing of it. He wanted it destroyed, not preserved. It very much felt as if his master did, in fact, know who or what it was. Malik was not the type to betray his master. However, it would certainly do no harm to find out just what this other thing was, then destroy it. Once his curiosity was satisfied, he could let the morlu destroy it, and all that mattered was the fool of a farmer. Lucian did not watch Malik depart. He knew he could trust the cleric to obey. He had no other choice. The legions of morlu continued to chafe at the bit, but Lucian let them wait. He had not told his servants all, given the true indications of its thoughts.
It cannot be. It cannot be. She cannot be here,
he argued with himself. This made him think of the other, of the one of whom he played this game of control of the minds and souls of mortals with. Could it be that his foe somehow had some part in this? Was this all a ploy to put Lucian and his father off balance? That certainly made more sense than the alternative that she was here. He would not tell his father just yet. As Malik rightly feared punishment by the primus, so too did Lucian fear the wrath of his sire. His own monstrous nature paled in comparison to that of the Lord of Hatred. But if it was her, then sooner rather than later, Lucian would have to confront his father.
I must find out more.
What he had not told Malik was that, live or dead, when he next confronted the farmer, the cleric would reveal to Lucian the truth about this second force, using the human to shield it from his presence. Malik's new hand was bound to his master more than he knew. There were abilities in that hand that could destroy even her, at the cost of his human vessel, of course. Lucian found Malik particularly useful, but that loss would mean little if it meant securing sanctuary, especially from her. The primus nodded to the waiting warriors below, trying to ease his mind. Soon, with a collected cry, the morlu went at each other again. Metal rang out against metal as hundreds of warriors were slaughtered in the first breath. As blood splattered the floor of the chamber, it was like music to the ears of their master. Yet even as the endless carnage created by the eager servants below continued, Lucian's thoughts rebelled by returning to the previous subject.
It could not be her. It could never be her.
She was gone, either banished forever or dead. It was not within her power to overcome either. He knew her well enough, did he not? Only two could have known her better. One was his father, and the other was his adversary, who had been the reason for her downfall.
If this is not some plan of his, does he sense her possible return too?